that, then I think that talking to your daughter and having that kind of openness with them.
It also depends on your relationship with your kids.
Yeah.
You need to have a pretty like open relationship with your kids to get the thing done.
Otherwise,
Yeah, then it's just like completely off.
this thing goes very bad. I don't have kids yet.
No, dude. I'm just kidding.
I would teach what the Bible says. About all the, rigidity and stuff, but I would give an option like, but if you decided that you want to do that anyways,
Sometimes.
talk to me, let's get some birth control. Because the problem with our church is that we say, no, and then the kids ended up doing anyways, and then they get pregnant because there's no protection. And because they can come to us, because we say that they're going to die if they do it.
Dude is worth it in the
But I think
future.
we as parents, we have to teach what the Bible says, teach the right things, but always give a room for them to choose, because they have to be independent, thinking, rational beings. If they decided to do, they have to come to us and at least be safe, and not feel ashamed. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Because the decision is between them and God at the end of the day. It's not if they decided to do or not. At this point, it's between them and God. So we shouldn't be the source of shame and guilt. We should be the source of, okay, my mom is safe to come to. She's not gonna be thrilled, but she's gonna be safe. That's what I feel.
Okay, so we're gonna be talking about sex today. Huh? Well, she's like, what?
Really?
Extremely uncomfortable.
Extremely uncomfortable.
Extremely uncomfortable.
Just by really quick, any of you guys ever had the sex talk with your parents? Okay, only one?
Your parents talk to you?
What?
Only my mom.
He's like, what?
My dad.
None of you guys.
No.
None of you guys.
Nope.
Okay. So that means most of you guys learned about sex probably through internet or through your friends then.
Oh, the internet for sure.
Or school. Okay. All right. So what we're gonna do is basically I'm gonna give you guys a sex talk that you should have got from your parents, and then hopefully this will give you a better idea of how maybe when you guys when you guys have kids, not grow up. Sorry. When you guys have kids or already have kids, and you need to have the talk, then you could use this formula.
Cool.
Okay. This chapter is pretty much the talk, the one you should have had years ago with your parents, but most of us, except one, didn't. I imagine my version will. You're very lucky. I imagine my version will differ considerably with theirs. Besides, theirs was probably not that great. It lasted about 10 minutes and no one made eye contact. True? True? For the next few paragraphs, I'm going to put on my parent hat and give you the scoop about sex. This is the stuff your parents didn't tell you and perhaps didn't know to tell you. And I think sometimes, we give hard time to our parents, but I think it's like really awkward. And that's why I asked you a question, if you had to talk to your kids about sex, how would you do it? And it's not easy, it's kind of awkward and it's hard. But I think this is a really, really very, very good method to actually do it. Trudy?
Sex isn't just physical, it's more than just physical. Bet you knew that. Western culture works hard to perpetuate the myth that sex is only physical. If it's consensual, safe, and you're protected against unwanted pregnancy, go for it. If there are no physical consequences, sex is pretty much inconsequential. But you know better, don't you? Sex isn't just physical. In fact, you're more than a body. You have a heart, a soul, and a mind. Thus, your sexuality is inexorably linked to the non-physical part of you.
Okay. So it's just basically that sentence right here. Okay, and then we're just going to explain over and over. And actually, there's two parts to the sex talk. But the first part is basically sex isn't just physical. Okay, but everything that we watch, everything that we consume, it just tells us it's just physical. As long as you enjoy it, as long as it's consensual, as long as it's not hurting anybody, as long as you don't have unwanted babies, then it's totally fine. But we're going to talk about how it's a lot more than that. All right? Hyuna?
Think about this. Adults who are sexually abused as children find it difficult to heal and just move on with their lives. Why does it have so much power later in life? What is the big deal? It was so long ago. Why can't people just move on? Those last two sentences are a bit hard to read, aren't they? They were hard to write. They're so callous. Nobody would respond that way to someone working through the pain associated with childhood sexual abuse. But that's my point. If sex is just physical, then once any physical
Damage.
damage was healed, that would be the end of it.
Okay, does that make sense? So if I was talking to somebody who was sexually abused and we go, oh, that was a long time ago, didn't you like get over it? Okay, like woman up or man up, you guys would be like, what the heck? That's hella insensitive, right? Okay. But what if like I tell somebody like for example, like Danny got hit and then he got a big bruise and like 10 years ago. It's like, oh, but it still hurts, something like that. That'd be like, okay, let's keep going. But only Danny. Because men, okay, next.
Kids report all kinds of things to their parents, but they rarely report sexual abuse. It's not on par with the playground brawl or even bullying. It cuts way deeper than any of those experiences. Why is rape so much more devastating to a woman than being beaten up? Why is it easier for a woman to report assault than rape? What's the difference? They're both illegal. They're both physical.
Right. Okay, so why is it that if it's just the physical thing, why is it that, of course, we're not saying assault is okay, but and also people are traumatized by that too. But why is it that this is so much like shameful than this? Okay, let's keep going.
No, there's a big difference between being roughed up and beaten up and being raped. Why? Because sex isn't just physical. Most people's greatest regrets involve something sexual. When anyone begins a conversation with, I want to tell you something that I've ever told anyone before. It's always sexual.
Yeah, from my experience too, at least counseling a lot of people, it's almost always sexual. Something sexual. So again, first thing is, why is it that like being beaten up, like just abused physically, and then having like being abused sexually, why is it different if they're both physical? Okay, and then this is another thing is, why is it that regrets? Why is it normally something to do with sex? Okay, that we regret those things the most. Let's keep going.
Why do husbands and wives feel so betrayed when their spouses have sex with someone else? Think about the descriptive language we use. We say the offending party was unfaithful. There's way more to marital faithfulness than reserving one's sexual activity for a spouse. But faithful is almost always synonymous with sexual faithfulness. Most couples violate most of their wedding vows somewhere along the way. But sexual infidelity cuts far deeper than failing to consistently cherish, honor, and keep.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to be unfaithful in your vows, your marriage vow. Okay, like because emotionally you could be cheating. Okay, maybe there's times you're not being very faithful to them, being there with them through the difficult times. Okay, because those are the things that you are actually promising. But why, no one, there are people, of course, who get divorced for that. But most of the time, it's like, I had sex with another girl or another guy, then it's like, that's like the ultimate sin. Okay, let's keep going.
Last one. Why were you so curious about the sexual history of the last person you dated? If you weren't, it may have been because you were hoping he or she wouldn't be too curious about yours. Because we know there's a big difference between dancing together and sleeping together. Both are physical. Sex is more than physical.
Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so if you had a sexual history, then of course you want to hide it. Okay, and then if they had a sexual history, you want to know about it. Okay, again, why? When you like get together with a girl or a guy, you don't go, oh, how many people did you dance with? Okay, right? You're not asking that question, right? But why is it that you're so curious about, or you lie about your sexual history? Why? Because the whole point, again, sex isn't physical. It's a lot more than that. Okay, and we're going to talk about that more. But the whole concept is over and over and over again. It's going to be two parts. First part is sex isn't just physical. It is physical, but it's not just physical. It's a lot more than that. Okay, and that's why you got to be very, very careful who you have sex with, because it's not just the physical thing. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys some time. Why don't you guys? Do you guys agree with everything so far? Do you guys think this is a good approach with sex talk? Go for it.
Like, have you ever watched,
The examples, I mean, it just really puts it to light. Especially like the assault with the rape.
Yeah. You hear about like even like guys who got physically
even then it's
athletes who
supposed to
sexual abuse.
yeah, but
Yeah, which like when you come out like
even to that, it's
so
like,
why you know,
they
you
want
want
to say something.
yeah.
It's because it's really more than that. There's something else.
You're never gonna be able to like
Really puts that
detach like completely that in your emotional.
I think those kind of people, like, in the beginning, it probably was like that, but like, because there was like so many different types, and you like it, you call it like hardened to it, yeah, I don't know how to describe it. No, yeah.
Okay, let's go with the second part of our sex talk then. Okay, the I word. Who's the next person to read? Louise.
There's a second important facet of sex we rarely hear about. This dimension is best captured in a term sometimes associated with the physical act of sex, intimacy. You may find this difficult to believe, but you have an appetite for intimacy. At the ideal end of the spectrum, intimacy involves knowing fully and being fully known. At some level, intimacy is what we're all looking for. Granted, while we may not be actively looking for it, we are inwardly longing for it. Sex isn't just physical. To treat it as if it were to undermine one's capacity for what we all long for, intimacy.
Okay, so we have to understand. Okay, when we are talking about sex, there's this concept of intimacy, and that's why again, sex isn't just physical. Okay, there is something called intimacy that is formed, even if it's just casual. Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Why? Because God created it that way. Okay, but we're going to talk about that a lot more as the series gets on. But for now, let's keep going.
I'm not railing against our culture's approach to all things sexual because I'm anti-sex. Quite the contrary. I'm for it, but I'm for all of it. The non-physical component as well as the physical one. More importantly, I'm for you. I'm for you experiencing the richest, most rewarding sexual experience possible. That may require a shift in your thinking, which leads to some countercultural changes in behavior. But in the end, we win.
So he's basically saying, okay, he's not saying this because he's anti-sex. He's basically saying the reason why I want you to be safe with sex, okay, or be careful with sex, is because I want you to experience intimacy with sex. Because if you have sex without intimacy, it's going to be really, really bad. But if you actually have sex with intimacy, like your sexual experience will be amazing. So he wants you to have great sex. Okay? Okay? He doesn't want you to have the cheap sex stuff. Does that make sense? He wants you to use sex the way God made it to be. Okay? And then if you continue to use it cheaply, then we'll talk about like what it does to us. Okay? Let's keep going.
Someday you hope to be in a relationship that's sexual but more than sexual. What you want, whether you like this term or not, is intimacy. The problem is, sex outside the committed long-term relationship undermines the significance of sex within the relationship you will someday value most. As sexual encounters increase, your potential to experience sexual intimacy decreases. If you were just a body, that may not be the case. If sex were purely physical, that may not be the case. But you are more than a body, and sex is more than physical.
Does that make sense? So it's basically, again, sex is related, because sex is not just a physical thing. It's related to your heart and your mind and soul. It basically everything, right? It affects everything. Okay? So because of that, sex equals intimacy. Or it's supposed to, right? But then if you just keep using it, not with intimacy in mind, then what's going to happen? It loses the power of intimacy. We're going to talk about it a lot more in detail. Okay, how this actually, the mechanic, how it works. But for now, at least, hey, sex intimacy. And he's basically saying all of us, we want intimate relationships. Okay? However, if you use sex in a wrong way, then you're going to lose intimacy in the end. And he doesn't want that. Okay, that's essentially what he's continuing to try to say. Let's keep going. It's a mistake to play fast and loose with your sexuality, assuming that when you finally meet the right person, your sexual history and hers will just be that, history. But it doesn't work that way. Our sexual histories are always a memory or two away. They raise their ugly and sometimes not so ugly heads at the most inopportune and inappropriate times. Often, during sex with the right person. Memories, ghost, guilt, comparison. Okay? And as you can see, when those kind of things happen, okay, if you're having sex with your wife or your husband, and then you're thinking about your ex, okay, what does that do for your intimacy? Okay, that goes right out the window, as you can imagine. Does that make sense? Okay, so, but the thing is, we normally think, and this is again, the societal thing is like, it's not going to hurt anybody. You know, you got to practice. You got to try. You got to go have fun. You got to go date around. You got to do all of this. But they don't. If sex is just a physical thing, and if human beings, like, you know how like people say all the time, and I 100% disagree with this concept. Like, you should date around. Why? Because they say it like this. It's like, oh, if you don't like your phone, you return it. But if you try out a lot of different phones, then you know exactly what phone you want. And that's what people say, right? Oh, you should date around so that you know exactly what you want. Okay? But I'm talking about like not just like maybe going on dates. I'm talking about like getting like deeply like invested in like relationship. But the thing is, human beings are not objects. You're not an object. Okay? You have a soul. You have a heart. And what happens when you get like invested? Even if it's not necessarily sex. What happens when that falls apart? It hurts. Okay, so it's not as easy as, oh, I'll just return this phone. Okay, so we have to understand that whenever, especially sexuality, but I mean, just I think in relationship in general, we think that, oh, if we just meet the right person, oh, once I just get married, all of this will go away, and that's just a lie. Okay, everything that you have done, all your past, it's gonna follow you. Okay, just like with like mental health, or if you have bad habits. Does that mean just because you marry the right person, all of a sudden, I'm habit-free or all my baggages are gone? It doesn't, right? And so same thing with our sexual history as well. Let's keep going.
I know somebody out there is thinking, but what about forgiveness? Shouldn't I just forgive and be forgiven? Yes, but forgiveness and consequences are two entirely different things. I can forgive you for backing into my car, but that does nothing to address the damage you caused. Consequences always remain.
Do you guys see the difference?
Oh, yeah.
So there's always forgiveness with Jesus. There's always forgiveness for the sins that we have committed. But the consequences, and sometimes God does take away the consequences, but most often than not, we have to live with the consequences. And we understand that. Let's keep going.
When a guy is unable to give himself away to his wife because he has given himself away to other women, there will be some bumps, tears, resentment, and anger. You might assume couples who are living and sleeping together have worked through sexual challenges created by their sexual histories. Don't fool yourself.
Okay. So again, just because they're married, that doesn't mean like sexually everything is okay. That doesn't mean they don't have baggages. Absolutely not. Okay, these are all things that you got to address. Okay, let's keep going.
Sex is physical, but it's more than physical. Your sexual experiences affect your capacity for intimacy. Sexual purity isn't an ideal whose time has come and gone. Sexual purity is a strategy. It's an investment in your happiness and the happiness for your future partner. Why? Because purity now paves the way to intimacy.
Oh, that's really the key line right here. Okay, purity now, it's an investment. You are investing for your intimacy. Okay, saying no now, no to sex now, you're saying yes to purity. You're saying yes to intimacy later. You're saying no to cheap sex, you're saying yes to great sex.
It's like you don't want to build with your tolerance.
Yeah, but that's exactly what happens.
That's a good
Yeah.
comparison.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about a lot more illustration, but that's one of the things. right? You become callous. Sex just doesn't become that thing for intimacy, right? Just to give you, like, for example, the whole point of God creating sex was for us to get closer and closer. But the thing is, like one-nighters, or if you got in a relationship but you're not going to get married, but you break up, what do you have to do? You have to detach. Okay? So after that, you keep detaching. What happens? Then even when you want to stick with your future spouse, what happens? You can't, because it lost that stickiness. You built that tolerance, and so now it's like it doesn't stick anymore. It don't feel no good. It's just, for you, it's just a pleasure object thing that you just do to just get pleasure. Let's keep going.
Make some of you feel, maybe some of you feel uncomfortable right now because of your past. There's hope. While you can't go back, it's imperative that you look back. Looking back is mandatory if you plan to move forward. Admitting to yourself that you've been irresponsible sexually may be the most frightening admission of your life. Because if you've been in a series of sexual relationships, you've developed a habit you're probably unaware of.
Okay. So again, the concept is, okay, the whole point is not to, hey, you should feel guilty right now. That's not the point. Okay, the point is, hey, what are you going to do now? Okay? So if you have some history, then you got to deal with some of that stuff. Okay? Because what's going to happen when you actually go into your marriage without dealing with this stuff, you're going to carry that crap in there too. Okay? And it's going to pop up. Okay? Sex is not going to be the thing that you think it's going to be with your wife, with a special person, or with your husband. Why? Because you've misused it. Okay. And then, by the way, and then admitting the mistakes you made, then it's going to help you to see what kind of, like, what are some of the mistakes? What are some of the damages that I can actually fix? Yeah? All right. Let's keep going.
Ladies, after each breakup or one night stand, you force yourself to just move on. You had to. But you did something else as well. You told yourself it didn't matter. But it did. You lied to yourself. You didn't let yourself feel what you should have felt. It would have been overwhelming. Every time you moved on, you added one more layer of protection around your heart. Your heart became harder the second time around.
Okay. So, ladies, I'm sure you guys can resonate with that. And then we're gonna get to the guys. Of course, guys too. Yeah, don't worry, Rich. We got you. We got you. If you resonate with the ladies, you can join them. All right. Guys.
This applies to us as well. In your case, perhaps you lied and promised and said, I love you. You said whatever you needed to say to get out your way. Then, when you were ready, you walked away. In your own callous fashion, you justified it. But the fact that you justified it underscores that it wasn't right. You would be tempted to kill a guy who treated your little sister that way. So you shoved those feelings down deep. The guilt would have been unbearable. Worse, the guilt would have forced you to behave differently.
Okay, so again, both of you, okay, initial sex, right, beginning stages of sex, like, this is so precious, this is so awesome. And then when it doesn't happen, you have to deal with it now. Why? Because again, sex isn't just physical. So you have to deal with the damages. Okay, so instead, again, maybe these are not necessarily gender, I mean, it could be this thing or this thing, but either way, there's different ways we cope with it. And then what happens? The next time around, it becomes easier. And next time around, it becomes easier and easier and easier. And next thing you know, there's no intimacy whatsoever. Sex is just the thing that you do, just with the person that you like. It's just a fun activity, but there's zero intimacy in it. It means absolutely nothing. But the problem is, and if that's what you want, that's fine. But the problem is, all of us, we desire intimacy. And I'm pretty 100% sure all of us with our future spouses are not going to just say, I just want to have sex and no intimacy. Okay? But that's what all of us, deep down inside, we really want, which is being fully known and then fully loved at the same time. And that's only possible if you are actually making right choices right now. If you're thinking, oh, just whatever, it's not a big deal, sex is. But when I get married, I'll decide that it's a big. I'll make it a big deal then. It doesn't work like that. Okay. Let's continuing on. I think this is the last paragraph.
If you've been in a series of sexual relationships, you have unknowingly and unintentionally uncoupled sex from your soul. This is why it's begun to mean less and less. It's expected, but not all that special. This is one reason sexually active singles develop a hard exterior. All regret is difficult to live with. Sexual regret may be the most difficult. Reconnecting your heart to your past is essential if you're going to become healthy. It is necessary to step forward to becoming the person you're looking for is looking for.
Yes. Very good. Okay. Any questions?